From the center of the universe and the home of your Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing, as the Toronto Argonauts take care of business and win 35-12 over the Edmonton Elks on their 150th anniversary week. Ben Grant, joined as always by JB, and we'll give you everything that we saw in our post-game recap. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about Something in the Water Brewing. It was great to see so many listeners out at Something in the Water Brewing pre-game today. They had the margarita pizzas going on, of course, longboat as well. And I know everyone that I saw was partaking in the longboat, which, I appreciate because it's the beer that we talk about on this podcast. But it makes total sense. It's a beer that is made for fans of the Double Blue, so it is made for you. So, yeah, awesome to see the support. I know everyone's been great. All of our listeners have been great in terms of getting out to Something in the Water, making it part of their pre-game experience. And that's just, it seems to be how it goes for so many of you. Go to Something in the Water first, and then make your way down to BMO Field, which is just steps away from Something in the Water. So again, love seeing you all out there, and we'll do it again next week. All right, JB, let's get to this game. This was for putting up 35 points. The Argos did it kind of quietly. It felt to me very much like a team that knew they were better than their opposition, and they just took care of business and slowly made their way to an inevitable win.
I would think it would be worrying to the rest of the league that a team could play relatively disjointedly with not its full roster of players and still double its opponent and put up 35.
Yeah, and it was, it was pretty one-sided for most. I know it got close a little bit. Like the Elks did pull within a touchdown, and it wasn't like it was. It wasn't like it was settled at half, but it kind of felt settled at half.
Yeah, it's that defense. I mean, that defense is Python-like. It just slowly squeezes the life out of the opponent. And then by the fourth quarter, there's, kind of limp and lying there, and the game is over.
Before we get into the recap and go through some of the plays that we saw and things we liked, things we didn't like, let's just talk about the atmosphere, the environment, the festivities for the 150th anniversary. I have never in my life seen so many heroes from one sports team together in one place. And they went back generations and generations. You had guys there that played 60 years ago, which is unbelievable to me. You had such amazing representation from that 1983 team, but it was every decade in Argos history dating back to like the 40s, like where they had representation. It was just, to me, it was mind-blowing. But what an event, and round of applause to MLSE and to the Argonauts and everyone that made this event possible. I know there's so many people that went into working on this, but yeah, it was an outstanding spectacle. Yeah,
it was. I mean, to be honest, it reminded me of the Canadiens, a sports franchise that values its history and knows how integral it is to them, existing, they're not just a sports team, but that they are part of the fabric of Toronto history. And they really showed that tonight. I thought having the surviving family members of some of the older players who had passed on, having John Candy's kids was amazing. The way they did it in a really kind of very simple way, really simple but very celebratory. Excuse me. Led by Pinball. It was amazing to watch. It was amazing to see how happy the guys were to be there. And even though it wasn't the biggest crowd, which is to be expected, I think, when a team is not playing for anything, I thought the crowd, really did themselves proud, with the volume and the enthusiasm for what was happening. So in the end, I thought it was a really, really terrific night.
It was a highly enthusiastic crowd because you had the passionate fans. Like Friday night in Toronto was a hard sell at the best of times, but on Thanksgiving weekend as well, the Argos already wrapped up their number one seed position. So all those things going against it, you had the diehard fans that came out to see
There were
the
there were a
legends.
lot of random jerseys at this game, much more than you normally see. It was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, guys digging deep into the closet to find like, hey, this player is going to be at the game. I have a jersey from whoever it was.
I have not
Ishmael
seen a
Clemens.
Foggy jersey in quite a while.
Yeah, yes, Ricky Foggy. That was fantastic. And how about the opening kickoff ceremony, which they haven't really done a ceremonial kickoff in years. That used to be a pretty traditional part of football games, but that's not something that's done anymore. This was a pretty cool event to have Prefontaine and Chomek and Alisic come out and do a ceremonial kickoff to Rocket, Pinball, and Chad Owens. That was unbelievable to see that happen. And then all three guys were able to field the ball cleanly too, which I was worried about, somebody pulling something, but no, it didn't.
No, and
didn't
look,
happen.
I mean, Chad led the way because he obviously looks like he can still play.
He does.
So he took it to the end zone, but then so did Pinball.
I know.
Again, for sure you worry about things, but Pinball looked great. He picked it clean, he read his line, and he was gone.
Pinball is ageless, and yeah, a lot of those guys are. These are special human beings. They are not built like everybody else, and it looks like Pinball looks like he could still play, but Chad Owens, he looks like he might be like bulked up a little bit from his playing days too. He looks like he could go for sure. So yeah, that was really cool to see. And then they brought out the different decades, and then it seemed like every commercial break it was somebody new, because it wasn't just like a couple dozen players, including the 10-time the 10 all Argos. I mean, all-time Argos that were out there. They had so many returning Argos that they didn't have time to announce them all, and so they had to bring them out in like two big groups at the end after they introduced like the sort of top 20 legends. It was unbelievable, and they had cheer teams going back into the 70s as well.
Yeah.
And they all did a routine together. They went and learned their routine. Phenomenal. Like what a show that was.
Yeah, very, very well thought out, clearly designed and run by somebody who it was important to, and then well executed, and and then the team came through and kicked the stuffing out of Edmonton, and it's a perfect night, nice, beautiful fall night down on the waterfront. I mean, God knows it can get pretty cold down there in October. It's a bit of a crapshoot when you're down there anytime after the middle of September. But a very successful evening.
And no real wind at all, which was perfect for the drone show that there also was, with the drones forming all the different Argo logos over the years, and then ultimately turning into a cannon, and then having a cannonball fire out of the drone cannon.
I would be in favor of the drone cannon moving forward. The cannon gets me every time, even though I should be used to it.
I can't believe you're not. I don't even flinch anymore.
No, it makes me jump every time. I always forget every game.
And there was one touchdown where we got two cannons because they believed AJ Ouellette had crossed over the end zone. Well, it was ruled a touchdown. Cannon fired, got called back to the one.
The world's slowest replay there.
Yeah, and then Cannon fired again on the second touchdown. Well, let's get into the game a little bit. Toronto, I thought, set the tone nicely early. That first drive that they had for a touchdown was it was clinical. And Chad Kelly looked very machine-like early. It was the second drive of the game. It wasn't the opening drive. The first drive actually went very poorly. He got sacked on the very first play of the game.
Incredible. Like they just left. They just left the end unblocked. Like, well, I don't think that's how that play should be drawn up.
It's not how that play should be drawn up. And I don't even know. I couldn't even tell.
5-step drop with an unblocked end.
And three different Elks hit Chad Kelly at the same time. Like, yeah. I thought I must have, when that play happened, it was a play fake to AJ Ouellette. And I thought AJ must have the ball, because why else would you leave the end unblocked like that? It didn't make sense to me. And I wonder if maybe that was a miscommunication, because they blocked it like AJ had the ball and not Chad, because you often leave an unblocked end on a running play. You never leave an unblocked end on a passing play. So that didn't make sense to me. But Edmonton was was determined to get to Chad Kelly early. They called that off because it wasn't working, but the initial plan was to blitz. They blitzed on like 5 of the first 6 Argos snaps.
Yeah,
and Chad took advantage of it.
It's a weird choice. I know when we do our OCDC, and that has never occurred to me. Like, I think that he has shown that, first of all, the offensive line is very good. And that is not, I mean, that has not to me been the way to get to Chad Kelly.
No, he's too smart.
He doesn't get rattled. I do think sometimes he gets bored or frustrated. But rattled is not one of the things that he ever becomes.
And so many times early on, they brought 2 guys from the same side. They brought the Sam and the halfback from the same side. And Chad kept running those simulated snaps so he could see it was coming. And he knew exactly what to do. And he kept burning them on the side that they were coming from. They had a numbers advantage. It was always like 3 versus 2 or 2 versus 1 or whatever it was, that scenario. And Chad just kept finding guys on the sideline with difficult passes to bring in, but he could get the ball there. And then once the Argos got up a little bit, I felt like they had a chance to run away with it in the first half, but there were a few miscues. You had an overthrow to Tommy Neild, which may have been on Tommy Neild. We'll talk about that one in a second. An overthrow to Davaris Daniels, which I think was more just bad luck. And then a drop from Demonte Coxie. And I feel like those plays were all in the second quarter. And that would have, like any one of those might have turned into a touchdown. Let's talk about that Tommy Neild play. A corner route. To me, it looked like the ball was on the money, but Tommy Neild didn't run through his route.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to tell, but that's what it looked like at first blush. That, when he made his cut, he looked back, wondering if the ball was going to come, and of course, therefore, he's not running at top speed, and the ball is being thrown to a receiver who should be running top speed the whole time, and thus you have a 4-yard difference between the two. Yeah, I mean that's a pretty elementary mistake. I don't know whether they're not getting a ton of time practicing together or not, but
they should be.
I agree. It looked rusty. It felt a little rusty to me. I mean, I know there's some reasons for why some of the balls weren't completed, but it was certainly not an offense that was firing on all cylinders. There were a couple of back shoulders that were just slightly off. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it, but it looked like to me like the quarterback and the wide receivers were not totally timed. And I would bet that's probably a result of the kind of revolving door of receivers that they've been going through with all the injuries.
And also remember, Chad wasn't getting the first team snaps last week. That would have been Cameron Dukes getting snaps, and he's probably getting more snaps than he usually does too.
But it's now Coxie's in a main. You know what I mean? You're changing the type of receiver and the speed of the receiver, and it's tough to develop chemistry with everybody. But I thought that was probably on Neild that he didn't run through that corner.
The one to Davaris looked like he got jostled a little bit. Not something you throw a flag for, but that slowed him down, and that's why that one, I think, was overthrown. It may have had a bit too much on it anyway. And then Coxie dropped one that I think he was thinking about after the catch before he'd caught it, because I believe it was cover 0. He had inside position. The ball was low. It was sort of down near his knees, but he tried to catch it without breaking stride instead of decelerating a little bit and making sure he secured the catch, because he was thinking if he could catch that in stride, he might have been gone. That might have been a long touchdown play, but he ended up dropping that, which we just don't see that a lot from him.
It really drives home too the kind of perfect symbiotic relationship, between Chad and the defense on this team, and that the defense is so good and so dependable that they basically keep giving Chad quarters to keep playing. And Chad is so good that even when he's not really on, he still is going to hit, 3 times out of 10, and that's 21 points, and that's enough to win. So it works really well, where if it was a team with a much weaker defense, I think some of Chad's off moments would register in a deeper way. And if the quarterback wasn't as good as he is, the team would not have the quick strike ability that allows the defense to get the play up with the huge lead. So it's the two of them make each other so much better. It really is sort of a magical combo.
Did you feel like AJ Ouellette got more carries, more involvement than you were expecting tonight? He ended up with 14 carries, 65 yards. I wasn't sure we would see that many carries from AJ. Like we haven't. There's been some games like early in the season where we didn't see that many carries from AJ. For him to have 14, too many? Surprised?
A little surprised. But I do think they were keen to have a pretty close to game, full game roster going for this game. I think winning this game was important to the team. And, I think his involvement, sort of reinforces that this was not treated like an exhibition.
I felt like they wanted to make sure they won the game. But then once they knew they had it in hand, like once it looked comfortable, that's when I felt like Ouellette got pulled. And Dukes was in not too long after that. And let's not forget how hesitant Coach Dinwiddie has been in his time in Toronto in putting in backup quarterbacks in quote-unquote garbage time. He generally doesn't. Like, how many snaps did Chad Kelly get last year prior to his one game that he got near the end against Montreal?
I wonder if they were worried. The game was definitely a little chippy.
It was.
Obviously, you have some bad blood between the two in terms of, I'm sure Coach had them fired up to play the Argos. And, Toronto has had its way with Edmonton. And, they're trying to come in and they're a young, developing team. And the Argos are top of the hill. And so they kind of want to make their bones taking on the champ. Maybe they were concerned that there might have been, that Coach Jones is going to dial up something a little exotic and hit Chad.
Well, and Chad did take some hits. He took some really hard hits, some were of his own doing, where he just hung in a long time. And one of those was on that kneeled incompletion, which was so unfortunate. You'd like to see him come up with the ball when your quarterback's going to take a hit for it. But they just didn't throw that much. They only threw 16 passes. Chad was 11 of 16, 68.8% completion rate.
An incredibly effective performance, that they didn't show very much. They did exactly what they needed to do to have a convincing win.
Some new stuff, though. They weren't as vanilla as last week on the offensive side of the ball or defense. They did do some different things, but they were conservative in that they ran way more than they threw, which you don't typically see from a CFL team. 19 passing attempts and over 30 rushing attempts. So that kind of tells you right there the style they were looking for.
Yeah, and they did. I thought Trey Ford was pretty impressive, I have to say, watching him in person. He clearly is a dynamic athlete. As a quarterback, if he continues to develop, he's going to be a problem. In terms of the dual threat quarterback, he is very much that. He had one preposterous touchdown in the game, where he sort of ran in circles from the whole defense and then threw across his body to a guy in the end zone with arm strength that should not be able to exist. So I was pretty impressed, and I thought they did a really good job of keeping him in the pocket for the most part. He had one or two runs, but he was not certainly running all over them. And, so I agree. Like, I think they definitely dialed up some stuff to keep him under control because they did not want this to be, with all those guys there, they definitely did not want to lose that game.
I was surprised at the looks that Coach Mace gave because last week, like we said, it was just base everything. And it was exotic today. They had blitzes coming from all over the place. They had different coverages disguised differently from what I'd seen before. They would show a lot of pressure and then back away and send only 3 or send 4, but not the 4 you thought were coming. And, it was interesting, creative. And I think, like you said, they wanted to make sure they got this win in front of their home crowd. But on the 150th anniversary in front of all those legends, you want to make sure you don't lose to the Edmonton Elks in that game. And they just weren't going to let that happen. The defense alone wasn't going to let that happen. Just before we move on to the defense, let's just talk about a couple of the numbers, a couple of the performances. Weird that there were only 4 receivers involved for the Argos today. 4 receivers targeted. That's it. The entire night. Coxie with 7 targets. Ungerer with 6. Nield with 4. DeVaris Daniels with 2. No one else with targets. very unusual by Chad Kelly's standards. It's partly because he only threw 16 passes, but Chad spreads it around typically. He also likes to throw to his backs when he needs to check down. And Tavares often is up there in targets, only getting 2 today. That was really uncharacteristic, but I wonder if that was sort of more part of the plan. Maybe it was, let's not throw that much to Tavares today. Let's not get our backs involved in the passing game and just sort of try and beat them this way. But it worked. Obviously, whatever they did, they got enough done. Rushing, I loved that we got to see Dan Adeboboye in there. He had 7 carries, 41 yards. He is fun to watch running. He ended up with the best average on the night. Ouellette had the most yards, 14 carries, 65 yards for 4.6 average. Adeboboye was almost 6 yards a carry on his work. And he impresses me more and more each week. We don't get to see a lot of carries, but he's got a nice combination of burst and strength. Like, he hits people in a similar way that AJ Ouellette hits people, but he's also got a little bit of shiftiness to him. So as he continues to develop, I think he's worth keeping an eye on, and I think has shown enough to maybe make an argument for getting a lot more playing time and a lot more snaps next season.
And, a great McMahon game. I definitely thought about him for player of the game because he was terrific in kick return. And he scored a touchdown on a nice inside run that needed, some toughness to get over the goal line. And, he showed, again, a kind of lightning to the thunder that we had. And he definitely is earning a spot on that team. I think that, we thought he would be a real asset. And tonight was really, I think, where he showed what he can add to the team, both special teams and as a back.
So let's talk about shutting down Edmonton, because they scored 11 of their 12 points in the first half. Their only point in the second half was on a rouge that I don't know what was going on. Like, Edmonton's punter was having trouble. There were 2 occasions where he was trying to pin Toronto deep, and neither were close. One went like 15 yards into the end zone before it bounced. The other one was about halfway into the end zone before it bounced. And that was where those 2 rouges came from. But yeah, 11 points in the first half. It was close. It was 18-11. It was a touchdown game at half, but it didn't feel like that. So what was Toronto doing to shut down this Edmonton offense, which has been a problem for other teams? Edmonton's been playing very good football since Trey Ford took over at quarterback. They have a winning record in that span. Their only wins in that span.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's watching it is pretty straightforward in that you have to take something away. So, they took away the run, so it was not a 2-front war. And they did a very good job of keeping the contain and the boundaries set, so that a couple of times they got upfield and Ford got out down the field. But for the most part, they sent enough guys from the outside to keep him in check. I mean, they basically dared him to beat them with his arm, which is the traditional way of defeating the dual threat quarterback. Is until the dual threat quarterback can beat you with their arm, then they're not Patrick Mahomes, then they're not Doug Flutie, they're not elite. They're just a problem that you have to try and scheme up. And they showed that in terms of Ford's development. That'll be the question. Is he going to be somebody who can punish a team for letting him throw?
I thought one of the reasons we didn't see, like, the defense I thought played extremely well, but we didn't see much from Flo Remilade in this game. And I think one of the reasons why they were really conservative with how they rushed around the ends. You notice it wasn't the ends that were getting to the quarterback today. It was the tackles, because the ends were being so careful not to go flying around the corner after Ford, because he exposes that. When you go flying around the edge, he cuts through and it makes a play. And so
when you see him live, you get a sense of how elite his speed is. Like, it is impressive.
Yeah, he's a 4.4. He ran 4.4 at the combine. He's a 4.4 athlete playing quarterback. He's the fastest quarterback in the CFL, and it's not particularly close.
No, yeah. I mean, I think, people are happy for Edmonton that potentially they have something, but we'll see. I don't want to be down on Trey Ford, but we'll see because that is definitely the knock against the dual threats is you got to be able to play with both hands. If somebody ties one behind your back, you still have to be able to be dominant, and he is not there yet in his development. But he's a heck of a quarterback. So I guess I'm happy for Edmonton. We don't see them that often, so
Yeah, if someone's
I'm
going to
fine.
have, yeah, if
If they're
someone's going to
gonna
have found a
go,
quarterback, it can be Edmonton.
yeah, I'm not sure if they found one, but they might have found one, which is more than a couple of teams.
I feel pretty good about him again for his first year starting, and it's only been a few games too. And I know, like you're saying, let's wait and see until people have film on him. And I think BC started that trend a few
Yeah.
weeks ago.
But if he does get the throwing down, yeah, he is going to be he is going to be a problem.
For sure. For sure he is, because he's got that Houdini thing going on already. And he's got a cannon of an arm too. Like he can
Yeah.
rocket
Oh
it.
yeah. I
That
mean,
touchdown pass where so first of all, the ball was snapped from the 16-yard line. He dropped all the way back to the 35 in trying to evade defenders. He had McManus and Oakman on his heels. He shakes them both somehow, and he's on the far left sideline now at the 29, I think he'd come up to where he threw it from, and he threw it across the entire field into the end zone, and Gavin Cobb is wide open. It was a 12-second play. It took 12 seconds for that play to run, which is that's a century in football play time. And so no wonder Gavin Cobb got open. He was the fastest guy at the combine a couple of years ago, and you can't stick with him for 12 seconds in the end zone. But for Ford to be able to escape like that and then have the arm strength to throw it across without floating it so that it gets picked, but also the wherewithal to be able to find Cobb, because obviously that's not his route. That's just scramble rules at that point. But that play that's one of the highlights of the season. That will be on the top 20 highlights of the season at the end of the year. That was just one of those plays. The referee almost got in the way of that play too. I think Ford wanted to take it back to his right. He went to turn, and there was an official standing right there, so he had to come back towards McManus and Oakman, and still made the play. It was, bizarre. Kevin Brown probably doesn't like playing the Toronto Argonauts.
no, they absolutely have his number.
For the second time, yeah. That was obviously one of the plans too. Like, we're not going to let Ford escape the pocket, and we're not going to let Kevin Brown run on first down. They were all over him. His first 3 carries were on first downs, and he had like -4 yards rushing after them. He ended up with 10 yards rushing on the game, and that's with a 10-yard run thrown in there. So, yeah, he's I think the second leading rusher in the CFL coming into this week. Like, he's been a sensational running back this season, and I do think he's one of the best backs in the league. He did not look like it today because they were sitting on that. They were all over Kevin Brown's runs. And then the job that Qantas Stiggers did on Geno Lewis was amazing. Geno Lewis was so frustrated coming to the sideline after every series. He was complaining to the referees about being held. He was, forcefully pulling off his chin strap as he stormed to the sideline. Very frustrated. He ended up, I think they have 3 catches at the end, three catches for 33 yards. A pretty quiet performance from Geno Lewis. We've seen certainly huge games out of him. But what does it say for Stiggers, who's playing the boundary side now? Normally that would be Jamal Peters, and Peters and Lewis have had some classic matchups. Stiggers, I think, had the best performance anyone's had against him.
He did. I do think it's a little unfortunate because it probably suggests that he won't be with the Argos next year as he goes down south. I'm sure he will attract NFL interest with his his measurables and his ability to pick up everything that he's being coached. He is now playing different positions. He plays them all really well. He plays the run. He plays the pass. He's physically intimidating, but also he can run down the field with Geno. It's a pretty impressive package. I mean, I felt like we saw it early and were excited for it, and he has definitely gone through with that. He is. I mean, I hope he stays, but he is. What he's done this season is incredible for, like, not just a rookie in the CFL, but for the lack of really professional football in his resume. And the
No
fact that,
college football at all.
right, and the fact that he's able to play these different positions in in a league that is wider than he's ever played in, with rules that are different than what he's ever played. I'm sure the coaches are just can't believe that you can find a rookie. I mean, it's just honestly, it's bananas to have a rookie who can be useful at a couple of different places. Like that's what vets do, not somebody who's learning the game.
And 21 years old, like 21-year-old shut down Geno Lewis today. And that's why
Yeah.
he's going to be in the NFL next season, I think. And we said that in training camp. We said this guy's going to the NFL in training camp just after seeing him a couple of times in practice, because he didn't look like any 21-year-old we've ever seen up here. So yeah, it makes sense, and I hope he does get his shot, because I would love to see that happen for him. But yeah, you hate to lose a talent like that if you're the Toronto Argonauts. But we're talking down the road here. Just today, to be able to shut down Geno Lewis like this again in front of that crowd and those legends was pretty cool. But all around, I thought the defense was amazing. How about that interior too? Hendricks didn't play today; he got a rest, and so they go with Brinkman and Oakman. Oakman was a machine tonight. He flashed his speed, he flashed his strength, he bullied the center continuously. He was lined up as a nose a lot, especially when they went to that 3-man, and he just had his way with a really good Edmonton center who just couldn't hold his ground. He was on skates all night, and then Oakman went chasing after Ford a couple times, which is impressive for a guy that's like 300 pounds, 6'8" or whatever he is. That's not normal.
No, I mean I love the Oakman. We've talked about it. I love the Oakman Brinkman combo. I think that is their best combo on the defensive line. Obviously, I don't want it to be at the expense of Hendricks, but if they can get the people in a lab with their calculators to figure out how to make that happen, that is certainly who I want to see come the playoffs.
Yeah, they got to find a way to get those three guys. They just it never seems to work that way. Some concerns a little bit on the defense in terms of Jordan Williams was supposed to be starting at middle linebacker today, and he didn't end up getting to go at all. And I guess something happened to him in warm-up or in pregame or something like that. So we'll have to see what that situation is and how that develops. The good thing is the Argos have time, and so if he tweaks something in the pregame warm-up, then you're probably not talking, fingers crossed and knocking on wood, but you're probably not talking about something major. Hopefully it's something with a few weeks time he can heal and rest. He's got like 4 weeks before they need to play.
So much time.
It is a lot of time, but yeah, that was the only concern. I didn't see anyone else go down with injury. A couple guys got banged up a little bit, but nothing that they couldn't seem to jog off with. I do want to check in with Deontay Knight and see how he's doing. He was down for a little bit, but hopefully that was just cramps or something like that. I couldn't tell. He seemed to come off the field just fine.
I hope this doesn't mean that I'm going to have to write articles about statues again in terms of the next month. I'm hoping there'll be something exciting happening in these football games.
Well, I like the fact that they obviously know they can't just rest everybody, but you can't even rest guys for consecutive weeks, really. The guys that are injured are different. Those things, you got to take care of it. Obviously, we see Jamal Peters, Cam Phillips, guys like that have been shut down and will come back when they're needed. But in terms of resting guys like Chad Kelly, I don't foresee that being something that they do a lot of down the stretch. It just doesn't make, you don't want to risk it too much. It's too dicey to have a miss like 2 weeks in a row is asking for it, especially knowing you've got to bye in the first week of the playoffs. So coming down the stretch, the Argos have 3 games remaining, and I think he's probably just going to miss one of them at this point, because if you miss both road games at Saskatchewan, at Edmonton, that would mean he would have 3 straight weeks off going into the East Final, and that's not smart. So no. I think you are going to see some good football played still. I think that's what we saw tonight. A conservative game in terms of numbers of throws, but it was still a good football game to watch.
Yeah, he played okay. I mean, he played fine. I can't lie. I would like to see a slightly cleaner game from him prior to the playoffs, but there's still time for that.
he just didn't need to do much, right? Like, remember, 11 for 16,
Oh.
a drop, and a poorly run route. You wipe those out, you're looking at, what, 13 of 16?
I mean, that defense gives him an incredible margin for error.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Right.
It's true.
And then his skill gives the defense the lead that lets them play the way they do.
And speaking of defense, that Wynton McManus pick six was a thing of beauty. Everything about that. Walk us through that play, like what you saw from Wynton.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like that's his kind of bread and butter. That sort of linebacker hook drop, where the quarterback has the guy running it in, and he just doesn't see the linebacker coming from the other direction. And, McManus was shot out of a cannon. It was clearly film study in the formation and the route because, he ran like there was something on fire because he knew where that ball was going. You don't often see linebackers catch the ball mid-run, but essentially he just ran from his position and caught the ball and then was gone.
And Ford had no idea he was there because there was play action. And Wynton didn't even think about the play action. He knew it
clearly
wasn't.
they'd seen that on film that this is a look, this kind of play action, in or slant or what have you, and he just ate it up.
And the speed to get to the end zone, because Kevin Brown was just hauling after him. Kevin Brown looked like he was fired out of a cannon after him. He's a fast athlete. And Brown tracked him down at about the 10-yard line and just didn't have enough strength to bring McManus down, which is impressive because after that long run, guys just don't have their legs turned to jello at that stage. And McManus was not going to be caught. He wanted that pick six so badly. And so he fought through Kevin Brown's tackle.
He is. I feel like, everybody, I have sort of self-nominated Pickett for defensive MVP, and McManus is in full hold my beer mode.
He is, because Pickett had a dropped pick six. He could have easily had a pick six today. At the end of the game, you just don't see that from him. He makes play after play after play, and there he undercuts a short route. The Argos are blitzing. Ball has to come out fast. Pickett knows where it's going. Hits him in both hands, and there was nothing but daylight in front of him. He could have walked in for a touchdown, but he just couldn't secure the football.
I still lean Pickett, but certainly McManus is...
He's making a case.
He is making a case because he is dominant in run stopping, and now, a scoring machine. It's a lot in one package.
And let's just dive into special teams quickly before we start picking our players of the game and wrapping up here. Javon Leake, another astonishing game. I thought he had the CFL record. There was one punt where it looked like he was going to take it. Actually, there were two where he looked like he might take it the distance, but one especially down the boundary side, and he ended up getting tripped up by the punter. But what a night for him. Well blocked, but he's just got a gift now for setting up his blocks where he knows exactly how to set them up. You'll see him take two steps this way and then come back this way, and it's almost always there. But yeah, what a night from Javon Leake.
Yeah, the game, I'll be honest, was not always a nail biter. So there were times where I was, in my mind workshopping some nicknames. I do like for Leake. I am moving towards the Lakeshore Express service. With shout out Go Train for Leake. I mean, obviously Leake Shore is right there, but maybe that's a little too punny. I'm leaning right now with the Lakeshore Express service for Javon Leake. So I'm going to move forward with that.
And then in the kicking game, Boris Beatty 2 for 2 on field goals. He moves into 23rd all time on the Argos scoring.
Boris the boot again, just so easy to take for granted what he delivers in terms of consistency and power. And I don't know, it's going to be tough for Haggerty. I really think it is because Boris's punting has been very good. Yeah,
he punted extremely well. The punt that went out at the 1, he had some really nice hang time on others. He ended up with, he had a long of 59.
And it's clearly not affecting his kicking game. Yeah,
Well, he's
he's
having one of the
making.
best seasons of his career kicking
Yeah,
field goals, but he averaged 49 yards a punt, and they were well placed punts. So, yeah, tip of the hat to Boris Beatty. He was fantastic tonight, punting and kicking. Javon Lee playing well, and they did fairly well in stopping CJ Sims. Like CJ Sims burned them the last time these two teams played. Remember, he had a couple of
yeah.
monster returns.
The outside contain on the kick return was impressive. It was, very it was teach film a couple of times. It was really, really good guys getting outside and turning him back into pursuit flow. And guys getting down the field quickly. I thought the kick return game was excellent tonight.
Yeah, no, it was on point for sure. All right, well, let's get into our players of the game and our play of the game. So, you go first. Who is your player of the game in this one?
This is where I like to shout out all the players that I almost picked. I always like Pickett, but that gets very boring. I like McMahon. I thought he really popped. Leak had a nice game as well, but I'm gonna go with speaking of nicknames, I'm gonna go with my guy, the CN Power. I thought that Oakman was fantastic. He is always good, but sometimes he is dominant. And tonight was one of those nights. He had an early sack, which they then turned into a scoring drive. It ended Edmonton's scoring drive. It kind of, the overused expression, but to set the tone, he set the tone early. His pursuit was excellent all game. He was all over. He was all over the field. I noticed him 7 or 8 times, which is, a little unusual for a defensive lineman, to be honest. And for me, he was their player of the game.
I'm going to go less obvious than I usually do here, and I'm going to go with Mason Pierce. And the reason I'm going with Mason Pierce is not so much like I think you could very easily argue that Oakman, Pickett, McManus may have had more highlight plays or maybe a better overall game. Mason Pierce was an afterthought coming into this season from the Colorado School of Mines. Nobody really expected too much of him. He wasn't really even expected to dress. He gets put in the lineup because there are injuries to Robertson Daniel, Deshaun Amos, and is tentative in his first action. He's playing way off the ball, really late to close. The next game he's slightly better, and then slightly better after that. I thought he was absolutely solid today. I thought he had great coverage. He delivered a couple of really solid hits, forced an incompletion, and then he had a pretty ridiculous interception, a play that would have. I don't think it was a ball game at that point, but this really did end it. What looked like a completion to Gavin Cobb.
Yeah,
Cobb was running a seam route.
I thought he came down with it. Well,
I
he
did too. Yeah, I did too at first, and he would have. He would have if it weren't for the nonstop effort from Mason Pierce. So like as Cobb is going down with the football, Pierce is like somersaulting over him, trying to still break at the pass. Like he hasn't given up on that part, and ends up actually pulling it from his arms before he can secure it. And he actually got a run back too, but it was correctly called down at the spot. But what an interception by Mason Pierce. So that incredible athletic play, plus the aggressive coverage that we saw from him. I just think to see a player that you weren't expecting at all to even dress, suddenly not just start, but be one of your better players on defense in any particular game, I think is a real tribute to the effort that he's given and the talent that he has. So I was super impressed with Mason Pierce. He's my player of the game.
Yeah, and that's a great choice. And Harry played great as well. Like it's
Right.
also obviously an incredible testament to the defensive back coaching.
Yeah.
That they are able to get guys and work them in, and not necessarily plug and play guys, but guys who are learning, and they're able to coach them up and get them confident. And it definitely is a bit of a factory over there right now.
It is. That's just it. Like, hats off to Coach Fields, Coach Bell, for being able to, like, think about that. They're without Jamal Peters, Deshaun Amos, Robertson Daniel. Robertson Daniel was arguably the best player on defense until he got hurt. It was either him or Pickett. Deshaun Amos is an outstanding player. Jamal Peters was an all-star, and one of the best corners in the league. Those three guys are out. Three other guys come in, and they don't miss a beat. It is unbelievable, actually, that they've been as good as they have.
Don't even think about taking Coach Bell, Coach Mace.
Yeah, wherever you end up next year. Play of the game. What do you have for your play of the game?
Again, it was not the most tension-filled game. I thought about Pinball's return. I thought that was a wonderful kind of early play of the game. But just slightly after Pinball's return is my play of the game, which was Beatty's punt that went out at the 1. It buried Edmonton. Edmonton was unable to move the ball. Toronto then scored a touchdown. When Toronto scores first, they are almost unbeatable. So in a sense, he facilitated Toronto getting out in front, which then means that they're going to win.
Yeah, I know. I like that call as a play of the game. It's an underrated punt, but it bounced at the 9 and took a sideways hop and just slowly made its way. I think Sims back there couldn't believe what was happening there. He was sure, first of all, that it was going to bounce into the end zone, and then as it started rolling towards the sideline, it just kept getting closer and closer and closer, and then out at the 1, like, give me a break. He's probably thinking. So, yeah, pretty amazing punt from Boris Beatty. My play of the game is going to be way more obvious than my player of the game. It's the pick 6 from Wyndham McManus. And the reason for that is the game was done. Like, at that stage, Toronto's up a touchdown and Edmonton was driving. Trey Ford looked really good up until that pick 6. He was playing great football. He'd started to string some passes together. His stats at that point were excellent, making good decisions. And then Wyndham McManus executes that pick. Now it spreads the lead, but it also got in the head of Trey Ford. He was not the same after that. After that, when McManus picked 6, he misfired. He threw a ball down the sideline for Lewis in frustration. Stiggers was all over him. There was nothing there. He fired a ball well over Gavin Cobb's head. He threw a Cobb on a ball where Cobb wasn't even looking, where I don't think Cobb knew that he was an option on that play. It just seemed like he was off the rails after that, and it took a while for him to settle down a little bit, and by then it was too late, and the Argos had built up too much of a lead.
I mean, I would imagine that it, as a young quarterback, I would imagine that it's really, unbalancing to throw a pick where you didn't see the guy coming. It's one thing to make a bad throw or an underthrow, or you thought you had a window and then there wasn't a window, but to throw a ball that you think is going to be a completion, then out of nowhere a guy comes, like that has to be, now you start seeing ghosts. Now you wonder every time you throw a ball, is there going to be a blue shirt that comes screaming out of somewhere that I don't see? I have to imagine that at least some of that happens to a young quarterback.
And it's emotionally frustrating too. You're trying to tie the game up. You're actually putting things together. You're like, you know what? We have a shot. If I keep playing like this, we're going to win this game. And then suddenly it's over. Like one throw, and like, oh, well, that's that then. And that's what it felt like. That's what it looked like for us. Well, that will just about do it for us on the post-game reaction episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Next game, Ottawa at Toronto, next Saturday, October 14th. Make sure you catch our pregame walkthrough this week. But that will just about do it for us. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe, foe, foe.